way by nature. And I remember in the beginning, I was like, well, that's fucking unnecessary. I don't really agree with that. I think you should do the minimum amount to get things done, the minimum amount of violence to get things done. And that's how I felt for the first couple of years. Then I realized, and these people, by the way, that I'm talking about were at that time had done more trips, were more experienced than me. And then I realized over time, no, when it comes to, so I have this thing called the violence scale, which is totally arbitrary. I made it up, but the violence scale is a 1 through 10 scale. And, for me back then, it was like, start with 1, and if 1 doesn't work, you go to 2, and if 2 doesn't work, you go to 3, and then once it works, then you stop. And what I eventually learned is that every number in between 0 and 10 is risk that you're taking on to go through those numbers. For me to truly have no risk, I come in at a 0. As soon as I know it's going to be violent and that switch is flipped, I go to 10. Because the reason is, if they go to a higher number before I do, I'm dead. They win, I lose. So you learn over time, you have to be absolutely when it comes to violence and it comes to that game, everything in between, 1 and 9 is just you opening yourself up to lose. And it goes like fighting, and I'm not talking about boxing, or like real fighting. I always say, and look, I'm not a martial artist, but I always say, the first rule of fighting, same thing as the first rule of gunfighting, same thing as the first rule of war: cheat. There's no honor in death. The freaking first, there's no rules. No one, it's war. Fuck you. Like, that's the reality of it. And it's a horrible reality. And the problem is that we're at a point where we can't do war that way for many reasons. So there's this ambiguity in this. It's just, we're doing war with rules, which doesn't make any sense. It would blow people's minds how much risk we take as soldiers, or airmen, Navy, whatever, Marines, to when we know we shouldn't, because of politics, essentially.
Puts a lot of pressure on very young people, though, to be able to accurately gauge when a 1 is even going to become a 2, right? And talk about that challenge a little bit, because I imagine as you got more experienced, that was probably an easier call to make. But for an 18-year-old out there for the first time, if you're looking at it as a 1 or a 10, you actually got to be really good at figuring out when it's a 2. And my guess is when you're not that experienced, that's a pretty damn hard call to make.
It is, and people can't grasp how much training it takes to go into a room and there's a good guy and a bad guy, and only shoot the bad guy. I mean, it's not only an unbelievable amount of training, it's an unbelievable amount of time. And on top of all that, you learn through the training process, it's also something in your head. Some people can do it, some people can't.
And you don't really know till you're there, right?
No,
I mean, you can train your ass out and talk about that. I mean, so you went through some of the most extensive training possible. How prepared were you? How different is it when you actually get into the real thing?
It's like you're saying, which is, you don't really, the selection process that we had, and I'll not go into it, but I'll say this, because it's unofficial. This is what I think it is because what it is, what you're doing, you're like, what the fuck does this have to do with fighting wars? Like, this doesn't make any sense, and now I look back and I go, God, it's so smart.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And again, not official. This is what I think it is. What I think it is it's designed to find people that can get instructions once and figure it out. If they make a mistake, they self-correct. They don't go down the rabbit hole of, they just self-correct, because it's all by yourself. You're alone almost the whole time. And the other thing is they learn very quickly, and they learn very quickly from their mistakes. That's what I think it's designed for, because once you have that, you can teach them anything.
I want to ask you something else about. I mean, I guess so much shit I want to ask you, man. But I want to ask you something else about that chasm.
Yeah.
When you think about these things, like what you're talking about the parallel between Braveheart times and war and life, and like how now it's like everything in our life, literally everything is
So
like,
easy.
One thing they talk about is just transportation. Just like literally in World War II would have taken few weeks of just
Yeah.
still being around
Yeah.
soldiers, but like now it's like literally the next day you're home.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering in your situation as well, because your time there just kind of came to an end, correct? Because you were wounded.
Yeah,
and
I was
and
straight, litter to Germany within a day, and then back home took like a week. But
I know Kevin Vance, another guy that we both love and
Absolutely.
have ultimate respect for. He talked about, why one of the reasons he ultimately, got out was he was like, look, man, I would come home and I'd have to turn the monster off.
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
I'd
yeah.
go and I'd have to turn the monster back on. And it was just getting harder and harder to make that. But for you and your psychology, you still had years, you still were there with these guys doing this thing for years. So I imagine your monster, whatever it was for you, was that's where you were at. So do you feel like that, as far as whatever you want to call it, the PTSD, or like the psychological distress and torture that you went through, was that part of it? Do you think that it was like the proximity was taken, like the rug was pulled out from under you in a way? Or do you think you were going to go through that no matter what?
I think I was lucky in the sense that I had always compartmentalized my life, just for reasons of how I grew up, so I'd always compartmentalized things. So it didn't really affect me as much as I saw it affect others.
In ways did that serve you?
I also think, again, I'm being very forthcoming. I also think I just have a little sociopathic, I've watched like every murder documentary there is, and I'm fascinated by watching psychopaths. And, just psychopathy is just fascinating to me. And I obviously very much have a conscience. And funny story, I was talking to my therapist years ago, and I was like, I'm worried I might be a sociopath, like, because I have these sociopath tendencies. And she goes, Tyler, if you're worried that you're a sociopath,
You're not.
you're definitely not a sociopath. And I was like, oh, can't argue with that one. Yeah. I'm like, how did I miss that one? But I definitely have this little thing where, and I'll give you a story, and there's nothing. I'm going to tell you the story, and it's going to sound crazy, but it's not crazy, and that's why I'm telling it. We did this raid on this house, and anyways, fucking, I don't know, 13 guys were shot. I can't remember. And I had a digital camera, and I had to go take pictures of of all of them, all the guys, and run it through the intel system, blah, blah, blah. And I went to this one guy. He was in the kitchen, and he was shot, I don't know how many times, but at least 8. Not that I'm fucking counting holes, but he wasn't dead. And his head was, down, and I got down there to take the picture. And when I got down there, I realized he wasn't dead. And I just kind of watched him. And then I was like, oh shit, I think he's going to die. I think he's going to die right now. And I just sat there, and I just watched him. And I literally did it. It was an experiment. Like a human experiment. It had nothing to do with the military. I was just like, I want to see what does it do anything? And no, I didn't, just nothing. It didn't mean anything to me. And what I realized is that in my head, again, the little sociopathic quality is, once I put you in you're a piece of shit category, I don't care if your whole house and family burned down. that's just the way I am. Up until that, I'll be the greatest dude ever.
Right.
Like I'll fucking die for you.
Right.
But once you are a piece of shit that affects, does damage to other people, you're fucking done.
But isn't that must be a necessity of fighting in a war, right? I mean, if you walk into every situation second guessing every single interaction you have while you're out in the field as a soldier, talk about your risk spectrum. You're pushing yourself way down the risk spectrum every single time, right?
Yeah, but you do see there's varying degrees of it. Like some people can still do the job, but they still can have the awareness of kind of that human interaction. Like, oh, this is another human being. Whereas when I, like this guy, it wasn't that he wasn't a human being. I just didn't give a shit. Like I knew he was a piece of shit. I knew what he was doing. He was a horrible person. And I'm like, I'm glad you're dying. Fuck you. And it just didn't, but I didn't have, not only did I not have a sense of, oh, that's sad, but I also didn't have a sense of, all right, one for the team. There was nothing. I had absolutely no feeling towards it. And that was, it was kind of it was weird for me. And I just kind of realized that's why later, these whole, when I watch Sociopaths, I'm like, okay, I definitely have that little quality to where I can just shut off any empathy whatsoever if I deem them as a.
But you have medical confirmation that you're not one, so you're good.
Yeah. Well, technically, it's just an opinion.
Yeah. There you go.
They could get an expert to counter it, but
Hey, has this country gotten any better at helping veterans with PTSD, or is it status quo?
That's a tough one. It's definitely gotten better.